Well, hello, and here we're back working on project number 9, appropriation and interpretation. Now, what we've done so far is we've taken these images from a magazine that we want to somehow analyze. We want to find what it is that conveys the message in these pictures and what some of the underlying subliminal messages are in these pictures. And in order to do that, we appropriated them, we fragmented them, we transferred them into a grid, and we're going to find out what story evolves, what story is going to emerge here. In this step, what we want to do is we want to apply color, and then we want to apply the design to the final to our final design project. So this is where the project is going to go on. When we're thinking about color in this context, it's not so much about choosing what's pretty, right? That we're going to choose a little bit colors that we like, but the function of color in this project is to support the analysis of form in these pictures. To explain what I mean by analysis of form, we talked about these curves and the corresponding curves here in the man and in the woman, and talked about gender relations in these shapes of these figures. On the one hand, of course, we have the shapes of these figures, but we also have the use of color. And on the one hand, of course, there's the color of the clothes, but then there is also the color of these cutout shapes in the back. And I was talking in the earlier video of how these shapes echo and correspond to the shapes of the figure, and how the color heightens our perception of this shape. And this is kind of like what we're going to try and get at. I'm not going to be completely abstract as in this shape, although I could be, but I'm just going to try to add color in a way that heightens the shapes that are already there. And what I'm going to do is, instead of just coloring in the background in a monochrome fashion, which I initially was thinking of doing, instead I'm going to create a second template, a second stencil for the colors, so that the colors have a shape that corresponds to the shape of the figures. I'm thinking of pink for these legs. I don't know about the other colors yet. We'll look at that. But when I'm thinking about the shapes for the colors, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I like the outlines of this figure, so just to show you here, this is my stencil for the drawing. This is another piece of paper that's going to be my second stencil for the color. Think about it a little bit. Think about this a little bit as if it was a color printing process, and we're going to run the colors through separately and then the blacks separately. This is a little bit like a printing process. I've worked a lot in printing, so my work relates a lot to printing processes. This, of course, is not a printing process, but the technique is of applying colors separately is not that different. The outlines don't have to register exactly. We kind of explored that in a previous project, that it's actually kind of interesting if the outlines don't quite match up. Gives a little bit of visual interest, because then the eye is constantly looking for the outline, and multiple outlines creates a little bit of a interesting shape. Now for the woman, I'm going to do something else. I'm actually going to apply color just along the shape of her body. So she's going to be in color. There's going to be color underneath her shape here. I'm not going to do this for the man. I think about this a little bit. Here I'm kind of interested in this flowing look in this image. I talked earlier about how the image of this woman was just interesting to me because of the continuous flow of the lines, of the drapery along the body, the flatness, the verticality of this, the absence of any kind of curviness. And so I'm going to emphasize that. And I'm going to do that, I think, by creating a shape that somehow reflects this flow. Here and here. I'm just going to put these lines, I'm just going to use all these lines and see later on how I'm going to cut them out. And I'm thinking of pink here. And again, I'm just going to see how that looks. I'm going to use the upper part of this drawing, definitely the leg. Somehow see how the pink goes in. I might actually do this monochrome. I haven't really decided that yet. You're going to make a lot of these decisions as you go along. Let's see what kind of shapes we have here. Now, one of the things that I'm going to have to do first and foremost is I'm going to have to transfer the grid, because I kind of have to know where these shapes begin and end. If you have an angle, this really is an easy way to get perpendicular lines. So I have the shape of the woman. I'm liking this a lot, actually. I'm just going to continue that shape. It's about the way I see it in this drawing, so that I get an outline here. So she's going to be a curved shape. She's kind of cut off here by the figure of the man. So we're just going to somehow cut off that shape. This is kind of interesting. This just adds an area of interest. The fact that she's incomplete. The fact that she's actually kind of covered by the man, that she's behind this other object, this other person. So this is a great shape. I'm liking this. And this we're going to do as a background. I'm thinking green. I'm thinking yellow or orange. I'm not quite sure about this shape yet. And this shape, going to somehow continue making a thigh, although it's hidden here behind the leg that's in front. It doesn't matter. I'm going to find my own shape. I'm going to find my own form here. So here we have the leg. Kind of like now this shape is starting to make sense to me. And maybe that's enough. Maybe just a pink leg would be enough here. What I would like is to have something in black. Thinking about how I could do that. But there'll be another black leg here, so anticipate what the shape is going to be on top of this. So going to have a pink one and a black one, because this is going to be black. I'm kind of liking this already. Once we start painting, we can decide, we can still alter some things. But let's stick to this, and here, I think I'm just going to create like a large shape here, just one color shape, and let her emerge from that. So we're going to color in this shape, this shape, this shape, and this. keep it simple, doesn't have to be that difficult. It's just about adding some color accents to what we're doing anyway. Okay, and now you're going to create a template, a stencil for this as well. Again, this shouldn't be difficult. We only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shapes, so cutting these out is not going to take so much time. Be careful that you don't go over the edge, because we're going to need that edge. But I'm also going to show you how to use tape to tape off the edges. Part of this process, I just want to remind you again, is it's about experimentation. And I'm making this video here and I have no idea how the result is going to look. I don't have a recipe. I don't have a recipe for good art. I don't have a good recipe for good results. There is no recipe for that. Anybody who says they have a recipe, they might have a recipe for something, but it's not going to be for art. But there are steps we can take, and there's criteria in the end that will help us decide whether we like the end result or not. The thing about making art is you don't always have to like the end result. A lot of this is also just training. So like starting to swim or learning a language, you're not going to write poetry on the first day that you're learning a language. Okay, I'll do this. I'll finish cutting these shapes. So now I've finished my template and I'm going to start applying color. This is going to be interesting because the shapes actually bleed from one image to the next, but I'm not afraid of that. And they already look kind of interesting. I like the way that the leg suddenly looks like the curves up here. This is the type of analysis I'm looking for, and it's not planned. I also like the way that this woman has like this kind of weird shape. We'll look at that when it's done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply color using this template to, which is going the paper that's going to be my final project. I want to prepare that paper a little bit though before I start. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to tape off the edges. And I'm just going to tape off about 1/8 of an inch. But that gives me a lot of freedom to not worry about the edges because they're already taped off. One of the things in this process is make it easy for yourself, and sometimes preparation makes things a lot easier. So I'm creating a second frame within the penciled frame. And this is going to make it, this way I'm not going to have to worry about creating a clean edge. Okay, we got this. Use the drafting tape for that. It's going to remove and kind of press it down a little bit. You don't have to press it down really hard because then you're going to rip the paper once it comes off, but just pressing it down just nice and even. And now we're going to position the template just about where we're going to have the colors, and because I have this extra tape, I can now affix the template also with tape on this tape, on the bottom tape. This way it's not going to move around and it's going to register nicely. See, this is not correct. It actually has to go out a bit so that it is in line with the paper underneath. try to get these lines. Here you can see the grid underneath, so that's exactly where the lines should be. And this is how you get it aligned. I'll try to align the top grid with the grid on the bottom. So now this is affixed and we can start thinking about applying color. What color are we going to use? I'm going to start with just what I have, okay? I have some water here, a glass of water, a bounty towel, and a piece of paper where I can try out my colors. And I'm going to use the paper which is from, this is the same paper that I'm painting on. And I'm also going to use that as a palette. I have like a yellow here. I'm not sure I like that. At this point, I'm just kind of trying to see what, oh, I actually do like that. I kind of like that actually. I was looking for a flesh tint, but I actually think that this is very suggestive. Now I'm using a filbert brush. That means that it's that has a straight edge at the top. This is going to be good at distributing the paint, and it's giving me a nice clean line. So just using the paper as a palette. I'm going to load my brush, but I'm going to try and not make it too liquid, because if it's too liquid, you're going to actually mess up. It's going to leak, right? So you leak underneath the edges of the stencil. So you actually want it fairly dry. But again, I don't want it too concentrated. So somewhat dry and still somewhat translucent. And then you brush inwards from the edges. And that is so that you don't push color underneath the edges. This does not have to be a thick paint application. In fact, it shouldn't be, because if you start messing around with too much paint, you're going to warp the paper. But this looks good to me, and it's drying very quickly. It's a hot day here. And if you look at the bottom, this turned out quite nice. We got a leg there. And this is how we're going to continue working. What colors do we like? I kind of like this orange thing, because the orange theme somehow, these colors are just really amazing. I mean, it's a fashion brand, so they know what they're doing, I guess. These are gouaches. Honestly, I actually got these from a friend of a friend. A friend of a friend used to work in fashion. And they were throwing away these colors when they went to computer. And I still have them. But you can use whatever's lying around. I like this orange, this is good. And I'm just going to apply this same way, right? Just inwards. Don't worry too much about it. Don't get too liquid, keep it light. Try to get it even, but you don't have to mess around with it too much. There's something about speed. I don't like to be rushing things, but especially in the type of work that we're doing here, I'm just working rapidly and try to get it fairly even. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for something that's going to be functional, right? It has to work. You can see the stencil is warping a little bit here at the upper edge, so you don't want to work too much on this. This is how we make these shapes.